Good evening. This is Redwood Wonk. My name is Eric Kirk. Dave Frank is with me. We are talking national news of the day. Congress is out this week, but there is still a lot happening. We're going to talk about a few very important topics, ongoing stories, of course, that we have been discussing over the past few weeks. But one of the things we want to talk about is where the Republican Party is at. They are preparing for the very strong likelihood that they are going to retake Congress next year, at least one branch, if not both. And they are, and it appears that Trump is kind of consolidating his power within the party. Chuck Grassley appeared at a Trump rally where they appeared together at an event this within the past few days. It seems like the mainstream, and this is after Trump has slammed McConnell. Republicans are turning on McConnell for having gone along with the Democrats to delay the debt crisis. Pardon me, the debt
ceiling.
Debt ceiling, thank you, issue, apparently making very clear they won't do it again. They thought that they could, force Schumer into that position. They're using Schumer's speech as an excuse not to do it again in December. So Democrats apparently are going to have some sort of plan. And so the Republicans, and because basically Trump says, no more deals, apparently this is what's happening. Trump does not want McConnell to have power in the party. Who knows what's going to happen there? But Grassley is one of the main streamers. He's not in supposedly the crazy crowd. He's in Iowa. Something like 55% of Iowans, not 55% of the Republicans, 55% of Iowans have a favorable view of Trump, even at this late stage. Republicans are not challenging the big lie. Some of them are even going along with it. We have these crazy audits starting to happen around the country. Governor Abbott pushing for them in Texas, others pushing for it, even after what happened in Arizona. They just seem to be shamelessly going forward with it. The big lie is apparently going to be the theme for their campaigns next year, and probably in 2024. Trump has all but declared for his presidency in 2024. The other potential candidates have fallen silent. DeSantis isn't talking about, of course, DeSantis is having his own problems right now, but he was looking to be like the star. Nikki Haley is falling silent. She's like on some board now, not even talking politics, nowhere to be seen. It looks like Trump has control. As we talked about within the past couple of weeks, one of the Republicans who voted for impeachment has already dropped out of the race. The others are facing tough primaries. Liz Cheney, the most outspoken person, is on the January 6th committee, which we'll talk about, facing a tough challenge in Wyoming. Will she survive that? We don't know. She's probably about the only outspoken Republican at this point. Even Romney's going on along with attacking McConnell, slightly different basis than the other Republicans. But Dave, what is happening with the Republican Party?
Interesting times we live in. I think that one sort of big picture thing to keep in mind is that the weather, so to speak, the political climate is unfavorable to Biden and favorable to Trump right now, which there's a lot of repercussions of that. And what I mean by that is there was the optics of the Afghan withdrawal. There's the overall unease about the economy, the inflation, the potential deficits and debt of the large infrastructure and budget reconciliation bill. And there's probably a couple other key things that are sort of dictating the weather here. So there's a little bit of a window of opportunity for as Biden's overall approval rating declines slightly off of the 90% level, with Democrats off of the God knows how low level with Republicans. I think it's, in the, 20 area, something like that. But more importantly, with independents. So with independents, Biden's approval has dropped from about 60 to around 40. So there's a weather vane pointing in the direction of Trump taking some action and being a little more outspoken, a little more confident than in the recent past. And you referenced his rally in Iowa this past weekend. Here at my house, we watched it just to see, what's going on, what's out there, and it was a lot of the same. He was out there talking about the election fraud and dot dot dot. That's his big topic. But I think there was a way he was putting a marker on the table this weekend by having Grassley there, Senator Grassley, by his side. And just to dive into that a little bit more closely,
Dave, could you tell me, did Grassley address the big lie at all, or did he avoid it?
He avoided it. He spoke before that, he avoided it, and then he spoke after that. So basically, he had been on the record before of criticizing Trump, and I'm going to quote here. So he criticized Trump for refusing to accept the results of the 2020 election, accusing him of poor leadership and extreme, aggressive, irresponsible language. Trump belittled and harassed election officials across the country to get his way. That's something that he said. And he said that Trump encouraged his own vice president, Mike Pence, to take extraordinary and unconstitutional actions to interfere with the Electoral College count in Congress. So you can
bet that Grassley's opponent is going to have that all over television next year. Exactly.
You read my mind. So he was facing a primary, and that person had one issue that was of primacy, and it was this issue. So Grassley kind of read the tea leaves, and all, lots of Republican advisors are on the record as saying, that this is something that he needs to do. So he did it. And so one of the things that he said was, I was born at night, but not last night. So if I didn't accept the endorsement of a person that's got 91% of the Republican voters in Iowa, I wouldn't be too smart. I'm smart enough to accept that endorsement. But so he was asked if he, about Trump's repeated attacks against McConnell as the leader, and he sidestepped. And what he basically said, what he did say, quote, "We Republicans have to stick together. We should do everything to unite each other." So he's officially a Kool-Aid drinker at this point. I can give you some other strategist comments, but I'll let you get some feedback.
No, I'm really curious if the Democrats can find a good candidate to run against him, because they can hammer him on the inconsistencies there and just hammer him on that issue over and over and over again. But that's, it might still lose in Iowa, but could damage him politically. That's just, they need to really do that, to play that up over and over, because Grassley is a long-time Republican. He's famous for having actually written much of Obamacare. He wrote it right up, working with, I'm trying to remember his name, Max Bauman, I'm forgetting his name, who was like one of the authors. And at the last minute says, I want this, and then there. And by the way, I'm not voting for it. He is a weasel. I'm sorry. He's like one of those moderates who changes his mind. But anyways, this is it, because he's basically threw McConnell under the bus. And I don't know, who knows what McConnell's going to do, what his thing is. I think they won't, take McConnell's power away. They're going to try to play this, doubly two-faced on this, but definitely they're banking on Trump. Now, we'll talk about the economy later, because they've got a problem. Republicans have a problem. They have to hope that this problem with Biden lasts. They have to basically hope that the economy stays in the dumps for the next year. They got to hope that. They have to do what they did with Obama and try to sabotage the economy for the next year. They have to hope everybody is thinking about Afghanistan next year, right? They have to hope that people are remembering this, and that independents stay upset with Biden, that Biden won't get credit if things do improve. And sometimes that happens, right? Things improve, but they don't give them credit for it. Not often, but that can sometimes happen. That the image stays, and they got a problem with that, because it's, as we'll discuss in the last thing, I think Biden has reached his bottom. I think it will start to inch up from here on in. We'll talk about that. So I'm going to let you close this out, but I think the Republicans have a problem. They've got their short-term gains hitching on to Trump, but they've got a problem. This could hurt them in their chances of retaking midterms.
So yeah, we'll talk about some of the nitty gritty in a minute, but just to give a bird's eye view, you and I talked about, a wrap up view rather. You and I had talked in the past, and I'd said I expected 2024 to be a long time away, but the Republican strategists have said two quick things. One is that Grassley's decision to embrace Trump at this rally shows he's firmly established himself, that Trump has firmly established himself as the party leader, something that appeared to be in serious doubt just a few months ago. So that's a development. And then to piggyback on that, but with some criticism, former Senator Judd Gregg of New Hampshire, 18 years of experience working with Grassley, and also an advisor to Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. So this is somebody who knows what he speaks. He said Trump's comeback was predictable after he transformed the Republican Party in the 2016 election. And this is a quote from Senator Gregg. He's turned the Republican Party into a cult, and he's the cult hero. There are enough people in the party that are foolish enough to follow him blindly, and there's nobody else in the room when he's in the room.
Okay, going on, we're going to flip over to the Democrats now. Republicans are sitting by watching. We have, again, the stalemate between the quote-unquote moderates, talking about two senators, and the progressives, the rest of the party, trying to hash out what they're going to do about what are being called the infrastructure bill and what is really the other infrastructure bill, but it was being called the reconciliation bill because it's the one that doesn't have any Republican support. So they're going to have to use that as their second shot of muscling through. What appears it's not going to be 3.5 trillion. Everybody's saying it's going to be 2 trillion. That seems to be what's out there. Big disappointment with progressives, but nobody wants to give up on the programs. So what it looks like they're going to do is instead of having it be 10 years of all of these programs, and again, expanded, child care, and different types of things, and climate change programs, instead of going 10 years, they're going to have them go 5 years, hope that at least the stronger of those programs will become popular so that it becomes politically untenable to let them die in 5 years, regardless of who's in power, and just, it's a political gamble, but hope that happens. So they're trying to work that out. The hope is that they'll have this thing written soon, but right now the Democrats and Biden's popularity is down, partly because of Afghanistan, partly because of a lot of issues with the economy, as we're talking about, Delta variant and all of that, and partly because it looks like they're not getting much done. But this does look like it's going to happen. There doesn't seem to be a lot of fear that this isn't going to happen anymore. It's basically working out nuts and bolts. Everything is going to happen, and there probably will be a vote. At worst, with a month away, but probably just a week or two away, where they're going to do both at once. Nobody's actually really screaming at each other anymore. They brought Sanders out to be kind of the bad cop for a while, but even he's kind of being quiet. AOC is actually in there, part of the negotiations, apparently, working out some details. It looks like progressives are going to get to keep a lot of what they wanted. When this happens and it actually passes, this will be this could be a pivotal point and a change in the narrative of politics in general, because all of a sudden, something will have happened that will change the direction. What effect will it have on Wall Street? What effect will it have on the economy? What effect will it have on general morale in the United States? What will it be timed with in terms of, will the economy be rebounding? It seems like it is gradually. We have this hyperinflation, and we'll talk about later. We have all these other things happening, but it needs to happen. And they need to do it now, and they need to have some of the benefits of these two bills coming into play before the midterms to have any chance to hold on to power next year. And Biden needs it to turn things around for himself and to be able to have any influence from here on out. Faith.
Yeah. So where we are in the position we're in right now is that Democrats are doing what they don't like to do, which is negotiating against each other or themselves.
Right.
So this originally, President Biden, his Build Back Better plan had a laundry list of aspirational improvements to the system, to our federal set of supports, and there was a bunch of them that have to do with greening of the economy and paid leave and child care and child credits and a whole slew of broadband, universal broadband. So a bunch of things that Biden actually said when he was running. I think that's part of the reason that he's working so closely with Senator Sanders to get the progressives together to say, these are all the things that would accomplish the goals that you set out in your Build Back Better campaign promise. And then so what then Bernie did was he went from that 6 trillion number down to 3.5 trillion to make it somewhat palatable. So now it's not palatable enough, right? So we have these moderates that are saying, I just want the number smaller. And there's this list. I took a closer look this week of all of the things in there. And there's obviously that's a lot of money over a long period of time. When you break it down on an annual basis, it's still half the military budget. It's a big deal. And so where we stand now is Nancy Pelosi, I think very recently in the last couple of days came out and said something like, we're getting this number down. We're talking about things we need to cut. Like that's what we're doing. And House Progressive Caucus Chair Jayapal, went out there and said, can you believe this? Can you believe that she mentioned cutting? Because we're not cutting, and that's where we're at to kind of where you are, where you said that they're going to do something different, and Nancy Pelosi, Speaker Pelosi said difficult decisions must be made very soon. When you look at the timing and the calendar here, this is another quote from her. Overwhelmingly, the guidance I'm receiving is to do fewer things well so we can still have a transformative impact on families in the workplace and responsibly address the climate bill, Build Back Better agenda for jobs, for the planet, for the children. And I think that she got a lot of pushback. So there's this question of what you said. Will they do a shorter duration to make sure that they can dot the I's and cross the T's? I do think that, when you go down the list of all the things that they're looking to do, it's a very big list. And so it might end up being like the Affordable Care Act, where there's pilot programs put in place to see what gets traction, to see what is effective, and to see what really people are clamoring to continue to support and get it done as soon as possible before the approval gets worse. And then 2022 campaign season starts.
And maybe that's not actually that bad of an idea because, a lot of times you have big ideas that don't work out that well, and then you're kind of stuck with them. Maybe it's better to go through and take inventory in 5 years and say, this didn't pan out the way we hoped it would. Let's not continue it. But this really worked well. Let's expand the funding for it and, build it. And maybe that's not the worst idea. I mean, it's just, so there are some benefits to it. And then, it may, when you got the policies that actually work, it makes people more, willing to support, such policies in the future. So it's possible that you could actually, there are upsides to this, and the whole ideology of the concept that government can be a focal point for organizing people to do better things, right? For bringing in new types of projects, industries, and the rest. So. It's just, but they do need to get something done because right now it's sort of like everybody's waiting. We keep seeing the same headlines, same people saying things. Why is cinema doing this? Why is Manchin doing this? Why are the progressives saying the same things? Why is it all happening over and over and over? They got to get it done and get it passed. When they do, it'll be a big dramatic thing, and it'll be a major changeover in the narrative, and that could be a big thing.
Congress must act. We cannot leave here to go home to our families.
We will not leave this town until we have voted, up or down, until we have voted on direct relief for working people.
Mr. President, you're very aware, because in the committee that we both sit on, we've worked through a process of trying to form an answer to a problem that is coming at us again in 2 weeks. 2 weeks from now, we will hit the end of the fiscal year. which means the countdown clock will begin again towards when we're headed to another government shutdown.
Okay, a lot of drama heating up with the January 6th committee. Again, the people that are being prosecuted are starting to go to jail. They're being arrested by SWAT teams. I mean, it is being taken very seriously on the criminal level, but the January 6th committee, it appears to be very serious. They have sent out subpoenas, I mean, massive amounts of subpoenas, but they are focused now on people who are in the Trump circle. And one of them is Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon, of course, is like the person that is probably who brought us Trump. I mean, he is the one who started this whole movement in a way by going way back, primarying Eric Cantor on the whole immigration. If anybody wants to find out how we got to where we are, what is that Ira Glass series, This American Life? Google The Beginning of Now. It's an incredible episode of how Bannon primaried Eric Cantor. And that is really the beginning of how we got here. Steve Bannon is in many ways responsible, more than Trump, for how we got here. Steve Bannon is being subpoenaed. And he, of course, at Trump's insistence, but probably also under his own will, is saying he's not going to honor the subpoenas, as did a few others. But it appears like people like Mark Meadows are kind of talking like maybe they're going to cooperate because they don't want to go to jail, right? And Trump has told his people absolutely not. Executive privilege. It's been made very clear you don't get to cite executive privilege when you're no longer president. Biden is saying, we're not going to quote executive privilege. I mean, maybe for a few things here and there, but we don't see any problem with giving these records. And Steve Bannon is defiant, executive privilege or whatever. And Adam Schiff basically made a public statement saying, Mr. Bannon, Trump isn't president anymore. You're all alone here, and we're not playing games. You got a problem here, and if you don't cooperate, your problem's gonna get big. And that's being echoed by other people on the committee. Liz Cheney, I mean, she's on there. They are saying they're not going to play around, and the only question is whether or not Merrick Garland is going to be as aggressive as they are. Merrick Garland hasn't said a whole lot yet. He's basically saying, well, you need to honor the subpoenas, but they intend to push this. They do. They want those subpoenas honored. They do not want to, have this game played as it was done before with the other with the impeachment hearings and the rest. They want the documents that they're asking for, and as far as the committee is concerned, they're going to do whatever they have to make sure that those subpoenas are respected. Dave.
Yeah, like a few new developments that happened this week. So one, I'll pick up on two of the things that you mentioned. One of them is that the Senate had a Judiciary Committee report released last week on Thursday. And in there, there's, a conclusion. I think it was Senator Dick Durbin, if I remember correctly, who presented. But basically that Mark Meadows, who was then, an advisor, a legal advisor to Trump, President Trump, he asked Acting Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen multiple times to initiate election fraud investigations. And that's a line that is, I don't know if it's literally criminal, but it's certainly against sort of those norms and practices of politicizing the Justice Department, and they're taking that very, very seriously. And he actually said that you just need to go meet with Rudy Giuliani, and he'll tell you, he'll let you know what plan of attack we need to do. Right. And so they have these people on the record, in terms of what they've said before the actual January 6th events. So they issued in addition to that, they issued new subpoenas to folks who were organizers of Stop the Steal. And there's a gentleman named Ali Alexander and another gentleman named Nathan Martin, one from Stop the Steal, the other from One Nation Under God. And so Alexander, in a video that he released back in December, he named names, and it's been since deleted, but the internet never forgets. And so he said that he and his organization plan to put maximum pressure on Congress during the vote to certify the Electoral College votes. And he said he has help from 3 GOP lawmakers, Representative Andy Biggs from Arizona, Mo Brooks from Alabama, and Paul Gosar from Arizona. So there are people who now are, real Congress folks, congresspersons who are on the, in the crosshairs of this committee. And so what you said, the second piece of this is what you said is like, executive privilege. So trying to claim executive privilege when you're not the president, you need the endorsement or support of the sitting president. Their technical legal argument is that they are protected from disclosure by the executive and other privileges, including, among others, the presidential communications, deliberative process, and attorney-client privilege. But it turns out that the statement from the committee was, I believe this is a matter of utmost seriousness. We need to consider the full panoply of enforcement actions available to us, and that means criminal contempt citations, civil contempt citations, and the use of Congress's own inherent contempt powers. And that's I saw a lawyer speaking about this. Those inherent contempt powers, that would mean sending the sergeant of arms to and so that hasn't been done in 100 years. Yeah, so they're probably not going to do that one.
They could send them out to make arrests, technically speaking.
They totally could. They could round people up. So criminal contempt seems more likely, which is kind of what we talked about last week. First, it goes to the House. The committee has to report to the House. The House has a Democratic majority. They would vote to enforce, and then they would refer to the Justice Department. And like you said, it just depends on what Merrick Garland says. But they are trying to run out the clock, and the Democrats know this. So considering they probably don't have executive privilege, but Bannon's trying to say, I'm just following the orders of the president. Like, you guys, you do you. And so we'll see. I'm sure lawyers will explain to Bannon that he doesn't have it and that he'll still be liable. He'll still have to comply. And so these gray areas will need to get sorted out.
Yeah, I mean, and they're ready for the court battles. The committee has already got their lawyers lined up. I mean, they've already started to research, and they have the briefs already. They're ready to run to court to basically make these arguments along with the Department of Justice. The only question, because I've seen a couple articles, is Merrick Garland ready to do this? And because he's not known for being aggressive like this. They wanted him to be a judge, right? He's not an aggressive prosecutor type. But maybe he can appoint somebody to assign somebody to do this who is that type of thing. We'll see where he goes with it. But the drama is definitely up, and Steve Bannon is every Democrat's foil. I mean, that's exactly the type of person they fundraise against him, right? So just even getting him thrown in jail is going to be points for that. I think that they don't want to do that, and the question is, of course, that everybody asks is, what are you trying to hide? That's whatever, and of course there's reasons that people don't want to give private documents up that don't necessarily have to do with guilt. That's obvious. That's always something I object to when people say that. Well, what do you got to hide if you're not guilty? There's a lot of stuff you got to hide, when pictures of you naked, whoever knows what. I mean, there's a lot of things that you might be wanting to hide, but that's why you discuss things. That's why you say, okay, I'm willing to give this, not that, that type of stuff. You go in camera with the court and you work it out. That sounds like what Mark Meadows might be doing, right? So but anyway, plenty of drama to go on that. We will be talking about that again.
I think I've made mistakes. I mean, every time somebody says I made a mistake, they do the polls and my numbers go up. So I guess I haven't made any mistakes.
We showed up and we demonstrated that we would not have our voices silenced by a Republican Party that across the country had a singular intention on suppressing the right to vote.
Some Democratic senators seem to imagine they could just break the rules on a razor-thin majority. Nothing would stand between them and their entire agenda, a new era of fast-track policymaking.
The Republican Party moved very far away from reality. And the fact that you got colleagues of mine in the Senate who refuse even today to acknowledge that Donald Trump lost the election. How do you deal with that?
Joe Biden is the president we need right now. Battle-tested, forward-looking, honest, and authentic. He has never forgotten who he is fighting for.
Okay, well, there's a lot of different aspects of this in the news. And one of the issues that Biden is facing is that the global economy is having troubles. There are, problems all over the world. A lot of it is related to the pandemic. Not all of it, but a lot of it is related to the pandemic. And we keep hearing about the supply chain, the problems with the supply chain. And it's not just the fact that goods aren't being made. We actually have a unique problem. There are plenty of goods coming to our ports, but we haven't been able to get things distributed. Some talks have been made today. Actually, apparently President Biden has actually worked out something with unions and companies where the ports are going to be open 24/7 all through the night, and working out deals where with truckers, there's going to be a lot more trucking, a lot more overtime being paid, a lot more well, not for truckers, you can't do that, but other people, and all of the major retailers, Costco and Walmart and a bunch of others have agreed that they're going to step up getting stuff into their onto their shelves. People are noticing that some of their favorite brands are hard to get, type of thing. So they are expecting to basically move things along, and they're hoping that will reduce inflation somewhat as more products become available. There's also a global energy crisis to some degree, and that's due to a lot of different factors happening. And, the lack of wind in the Atlantic hurting some of the European, energy system that's very much reliant on wind. And a lot of people, who support fossil fuels blaming that on environmentalists, and Saudi Arabia being upset with Biden for not, doing certain things and supposedly withholding oil. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what a lot of people are saying, blaming Biden for cutting off the pipeline, that happened. I don't know how big that was, but they love to say that, and it's just so it's just the fact that we use a lot of gasoline now. So we have this, and of course, when the price of oil goes up, and when the price of its byproducts go up, price of everything goes up. It's needed to make stuff. Food has gone up, and of course we have this bizarre shortage of the microconductor. What is it? Is that it? Microconductor?
You can either call them a semiconductor or a microprocessor.
Oh, a microprocessor. That's it. Shortage has led to cars being real expensive. And because new cars are expensive, now used cars are expensive, So, and for whatever reason, they include cars as their indicators for inflation, even if people aren't buying them, and I have to wonder, every time I try to go fill my tank at Costco, it's jammed practically out to the street. It's sort of like if people are complaining about gas being so high, then stop buying it. I mean, it's really kind of bizarre at that we consume so much of it. Maybe reduce your consumption of it, but whatever. That's where we're at. So we have these problems, and it's one of the reasons and the uncertainty around it. And the jobs report was much smaller than expected. It was 200,000. We're not negative. We're not hemorrhaging jobs, but people aren't going back to work, particularly women, because schools aren't opening as fast as they could, and people aren't sending their kids back to school because of the fear of the Delta variant and fear of businesses not making it safe for people to go there because of resistance around vaccine mandates, around mask mandates. Some people are just willing to take their chances, or they don't believe in them. And Texas outlawing mandates. Governor Abbott just signed an order saying nobody can impose mask mandates. It looks like several businesses are defying them, saying we're following federal orders. We'll see how that plays out in court. And so so you've got a lot of people saying, I'm just not going out there. It's crazy. I'm not going to try to get a job. Plus, my kids can't go to school right now because it's shut down because a bunch of people were tested positive there. So somebody's got to watch my kids, right? So there's this slowdown on this stuff. As if we are gradually, it looks like we are at least in a lull in COVID right now, and we might start to pull out of that. And it looks like we're headed towards vaccination of children 5 and over. That might happen within the next couple of months, but we still globally, we haven't gotten, people haven't gotten shots around the world. There hasn't even been an effort. Right? We're getting our booster shots when a lot of countries have hardly gotten anything. And that part of our supply problems is that a lot of these countries are still basically lockdown. They can't get them. Moderna, I saw a real bad report about them. Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson have actually made some effort to get stuff into other countries. Moderna is not only sending very little to the third world countries, but charging a lot more than they charge the rich countries. It's almost, they're like fitting the worst left-wing stereotypes of big pharma. It's almost like they want to go to, these left-wing periodicals. It's like, hey, what are your stereotypes? I'm taking notes down. I'm going to act just like that, right? It's amazing. So we've got these problems because you got the world. India is, in a lot of trouble. So we've got these global issues. The products that are getting here aren't being distributed as quickly. I'm not even quite sure what's causing the bottlenecks, except that maybe a lot of people aren't able to work them or haven't been able to. But there's indications that that inflation, there are, there was some economists today saying indications of things that will pull down inflation, even as we're pulling out of the slump of the job market. Usually we have inflation when more people get jobs, but that might not actually happen this time around. There was danger of stagflation, but we might have something interesting where more people are getting work and inflation actually comes down because they're making more things and more services, and therefore the price comes down. It's a very interesting kind of contradiction. And, the politics of it is if that happens and we are in an economic expansion, Biden's numbers are liable to increase.
Yeah, you said a bunch. So there, I think I took a couple notes. There's like 8 topics here, and so more. We could, this is, and it's hugely complicated. For the more you dig, the more nuance there is, and so I'll try to keep it a little light so people their eyes don't glaze over. But one thing to keep in mind too is that just when it comes to, again, where you stand depends on where you sit, and I hate to keep using cliches that are trite, but this is really 3-dimensional chess. So this is a show about politics, and one of the things that we always have to keep in mind, we're going to look at this through the prism of kind of who stands to gain and when. And so if you're looking at like all of this, pandemic, supply chain, inflation, energy, shipping, data metrics, jobs numbers, and vaccine availability and uptake, it's not clear that you can even have one point of attack on how to manage it. But so one thing I want to say, just to kind of make it so that we agree on terms here, is that data metrics. We get Labor Department metrics and we get econometric reports that are usually time slice, and they're usually by the month or by the quarter, and they're usually either referencing month over month or year over year. So a big thing that we all sort of seem to forget because we just live in the moment. Like, I think I got my vaccination like 6 months ago. So and I got it as soon as I was able to, based on my age and stuff. So the world moves really fast. If you look 1 year ago today, it was very, very different. And so part of the reason these numbers look like for inflation, for example, or GDP growth, why they look so abnormal is because we were in an extraordinarily slowed down, hunkered down economy a year ago. And things really didn't start changing until very, very recently. So let's just use today as a point in time. 1 year from now, we'll be comparing any data numbers to today's numbers, and they're going to look probably pretty. Hopefully, all future realities are contingent. We don't know what's going to happen in a year, but all things being equal, if we compare things to today, the growth in inflation or the growth in anything will be much more moderate than it will be when we're comparing to time during the shutdown. So the pandemic is really framing not just who goes out and when, who buys things and when, what products are available and when, but also how we count this stuff. So that's one big takeaway. And then kind of looking at, so much has been written recently about supply chain. I think that's a contemporaneous issue. People are very concerned about the supply chain. Where are the bottlenecks? What's the cause here? Many causes. Obviously, pandemic starts where we're not buying things. There's things not on the shelves, because the people are in lockdown. People aren't working. People aren't making things. And when that happens, there's a limited supply. And then when we sort of open up and we're like, you know what, I'm going to start buying stuff. Like people bought a lot of home improvement items during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. People bought, there's a bunch of things that people did buy on a limited basis. Those things, they kind of kept the economy humming along. But when there's more people buying something like lumber prices were tripled during the pandemic because of this reason, for example. So that's a massive amount of inflation in lumber, but nobody really cared because the rest of the economy was shutting down. That's a 300%. If you saw 300% anything, you'd be like, oh my goodness, that's terrible inflation. Well, we have much more moderated versions of that pricing perspective on many things. So we have if you look at meat, I think meat's gone up quite a bit. Steak, beef has gone up quite a bit. In part, it's because the limitation factors that made people stop production, like oil and fuel. People produced less energy products during the pandemic. There's a lot of stuff that people stopped making, in part because or slowed down immensely because of either lack of workforce, lack of demand, lack of certainty over what was going to happen. So that's one of the reasons the Fed created so much money of stimulus. And that's why money in almost every advanced Western country, OECD countries, they just paid people salaries to stay home because they didn't want to have this problem where the whole economy almost collapses and then the whole economy blows up and we have massive inflation as everybody wants to buy everything. They wanted to keep it as steady as possible to keep people safe and healthy at home. Our country, we practiced scarcity. We practiced, beggar thy neighbor policies, where we kind of condemned people that asked or even accepted extended unemployment benefits. It was very, very, very contentious about cutting off the unemployment. And I'll pause in a minute. But cutting off employment in September was a decision that was made because that's how long people thought it would take to get some degree of normalcy back for childcare, so people could go back to work. Schools are reopened, etc. So it's October 13th right now as we speak. This is 6 weeks. We are 6 weeks in to a transition period from pandemic lockdown to let's see if things will open up. And so all this pressure on Biden and his administration is political pressure based on people knowing that we don't remember much about what happened last month or 6 months ago or 9 months ago. There's so much more we could say about this, but I just wanted to give you my prism argument of we take a breath, we think about where we're at, and we could dive into some of this in more detail after I hear some feedback.
Yeah, well, one thing the science is done because there was a debate as to what would happen once the unemployment. Everybody, one of the arguments was, we cut that unemployment off and everybody's going to have to go get a job, right? And so there would be this increase in jobs, right? We would have 1 million jobs would be taken because people would have no choice, except that people have to watch their kids. And so they just make do with less money. I mean, that's what they did because you can't just leave your kids at home. It's against the law. I mean, so that's just, so all you've done is left them in an impossible situation where they hope they can pay their rent because there's also not rent protection anymore. So, so that science is done. It's over. No, that was not the case. Now, some economists today suggested maybe we should have paid them to go back to work. And maybe we should have childcare. So get this thing passed. That type of thing. I mean, so that's where the politics of it comes in. We need to sort of transform the economy to be able to handle these things. But I do think, we're coming out of an unprecedented thing. So to be able to say, who's doing the right and wrong thing about this economy, we don't have a model for this economy. We don't know what's going to happen. Hopefully, we're starting to climb out of the pandemic. Hopefully, more and more vaccines are making it to all of the production centers. And going back to normal, what is normal? Nothing was ever the same from year to year anyway. But hopefully, we're finding a way. Hopefully, some other variant or strain of the of COVID doesn't break out, and before we're finished with this one. Hopefully, as people keep saying, oh, it'll just be like the normal flu after a while. That'd be great. I don't know, but it's but that's what has to happen. But it does. Again, reading the stuff, it does seem like things are functioning. Stuff is getting out, maybe not as fast as possible. We are paying a little bit more for things, but the production of meat is going to come out. Prices will drop, at least relative to wages at a certain point. Wages are also higher. It's for the bottom level a little bit. Notice that people, the fast food has to pay more. Do they have to charge more? Well, again, it's what the market will bear. We'll find out. Anyway, it's just, so what will the politics of this be? It depends on how it plays out. As you say, there could be some other crash for some other reason we don't know. Economies are fragile, but there definitely has to be some type of recovery on a global level, or any national economy is fragile.
So global economy, I'll pick up on that key element, and I should have referenced it sooner, but I just saw the most recent number I got. I think this is Kaiser Family Foundation. They talk about the at-risk group in our country for serious complications and death for COVID. People age 65 and up. 95% of those people have gotten at least one shot. 84% have gotten two. So the deaths and the very severe immediate sort of demand side of collapsing the health system, that's we're on the right path. The question is, will we get enough people vaccinated in the other sort of moderate and lower risk groups that we can sort of breathe more easily, not to the bad joke, but
right.
Like things that aren't happening normal. Restaurants aren't happening that normal. Entertainment is not happening that normal. Musician, that stuff's not happening normal. Anything we do outside, anything we do in groups, malls, walking around malls, that stuff is not normal. So we actually, the fact that we have this inflation means that we are buying things, we are ordering things, and the vast majority of our material goods are, maybe not by dollar amount, but certainly in terms of volume, most of our stuff, 40, I think almost half of all of the things we import from in our country come from Asia to California, Long Beach and LA. And so that we see these pictures, the supply chain sort of disruption compounded by 55 ships off the coast waiting to unload, and they've been there a while, right? So it's not like it's been a huge deal. But then last week there's an oil spill off the coast of California,
yeah.
And they did a satellite estimation of what could have happened, and it seems like a nearly 1 mile section of pipe was interrupted. And I don't know how proven this is, but I've seen it in multiple sources by an anchor of one of these ships, and it just kind of dragged the anchor, and it disrupted a pipeline, and so that's an unknown, minimum, not a catastrophe, but an impact of that. So just imagine, all of the compounding things that it went into those 55 ships having to sit there. In part, it was because orders ramped up, and Asia sends them. But the port had a diminished capacity because of the pandemic. So now, like you said, the president has sat down and talked to unions, talked to other folks, wants a 24/7 cycle to try to clear that backlog. That'll add more products to the economy. Like right now is when people, I hate to say it, it's only the beginning of October, but people are already talking about Christmas. Are we going to get what we wanted for Christmas? So all of these pandemic-related backlogs are manufacturers would love to send them to us. So that's just one other piece of how that plays out in terms of not getting the things here.
Okay, predictions. What do you got for us, Dave?
Well, I wish it wasn't the case. I made a prediction in the past that I thought that the criminal charges and the taxation charges and all the legal challenges that faced former President Trump would make it so that he's just not the obvious candidate for 2024. But after Saturday and the capitulation from the leadership within the party, I think he's got more traction than he's ever had before. So I would say that barring actually former President Trump getting criminal charges that place him completely out of running, I think that he is the shoo-in for the party leadership at least through 2 years, probably meaning he's going to be their candidate for the Republican presidential candidate.
Well, yeah, probably, unless he is charged. We'll see. All right, I've got two predictions. One is I think that Biden has reached the bottom of his low end of the polling. I believe he's going to go up, and I believe that once these two bills, I've actually said that once these two bills pass, he will go back to maybe not above 50%, but he will be his approval rating will be higher than his disapproval rating, and I think that by early next year he'll be back up above 50%. That's one prediction. The other prediction is I didn't have any redistricting news. There's not a whole lot new stuff this week. I will be watching that, but I did look at some of the new maps and some of the developments in Arizona, and although it may not happen next year, it's inevitable that within the next few years the Democrats are actually going to gain a House seat in Arizona. They cannot gerrymander to avoid that. Anyways, well, that wraps it up for this week. And until next time, keep thinking.